course it would be at this exact moment that my neighbour starts woohooing with her child. Maybe she's actually subconsciously trying to cheer me on and knows how sweaty my palms are right now. I literally don't know how to start this video. Okay, no more procrastination from me or the universe. Hi guys, I'm changing my name. Yes, that's right, the title is in fact not clickbait. This was not my extremely non-subtle way of luring you in to tell you that I'd like changed my channel name or something. I am in fact changing my name, the legal one, you know, the one that the bank has. And I wanted to sit down and have a little chat about it with you guys because this is a big change. As of the 2nd of February this year, this channel will be 10 years old. That's 10 years of me putting my face on the internet, 10 years of you guys watching me grow and change, and for the most part that's 10 years of you guys watching me being deeply vulnerable and honest about mental health, adoption, queerness, chronic illness and everything else in my experience. And if there's one thing that I've learned over those 10 years, it's that sharing those things in the moment can be incredibly tough. Social media in general is usually a highlight reel and it's very easy to post the like happy curated up stuff, but when you're in the middle of the not so good stuff it can be so difficult to motivate yourself to show that side of things. But forcing myself to show that side of myself to you guys has absolutely been worth it, not just for me but I think also for some of you. And so I wanted to share some of the reasons for this change with you guys, not because I think I owe you guys an explanation, but because while I know a huge majority of you will be curious but also massively supportive and kind, which you always are, for as much of you who are feeling that, there will also be another set of people who are in similar circumstances or have struggled with some of the same things that I have in my life. And so hearing the reasons for this change might help those people to start exploring some options for themselves and maybe start deconstructing some of those ideas of like shame and owing people things that are really connected to the entire naming process. Let me just back up a little bit for those of you who are maybe a little bit newer here and don't know any of the history of myself that I've shared on my channel before. I am an adopted person. I was adopted as a little baby. I was less than 6 months old. I personally always grew up knowing that I was adopted. I don't remember there ever being like a first key conversation where this information was given to me. It's just something that I grew up with in the back of my brain, which was both a good and a bad thing I think in retrospect, because on the one hand it meant that there was no big catastrophic conversation where I suddenly found out as a teenager or something that I had been adopted. On the other hand, I grew up in a very small village and literally everybody around me knew that I was adopted. So there was never an ability to be kind of incognito with this fact, and there was always a feeling of otherness or difference that came with that, which if I'm honest is kind of something that has carried through with me through my adult life. And for a long time I always assumed that this feeling of otherness and difference was something that stemmed from that situation. Now that I'm older, I obviously realise that that wasn't the case and that it's so much more complicated than that. Names are a funny thing, whether you are given them because they're a family name and it's something that's passed down, whether your parents actually invented that name, created it out of thin air, or whether in my mum's case it was just a name that was incredibly popular at the time that you had a baby. Names never just come on their own, they always have a story behind them, and in my case they had a lot of baggage associated with them. I now know as an adult that the name that was on my birth certificate when my parents adopted me was given to me by my birth mother. My birth mother had never intended to keep me, and so she had never envisioned herself being in the situation where she was going to have to name a baby. She didn't realise that she would have to give a name for the birth certificate, and so the name that I ended up with was the name of the midwife that helped her in the delivery. And then of course when my parents adopted me, they changed my name to the name that you now know me as. I was adopted in the very late 80s, and while adoption is hardly perfect now, there are at least a bunch more safeguards and procedures and parenting classes and meetings with social services, which is the UK's version of like child protective services, where you have to talk about the possibilities of what might emotionally come up for the child that you're adopting. I would not in any way really consider my adoption to be a successful adoption. It wasn't the right fit for me, it wasn't the right fit for my mum, who bore most of the responsibilities, and because of this I was put in a lot of extremely unsafe situations. And in those situations, and then later as I grew up as a neurodivergent teen and young adult with no diagnosis, no support, my name was repeatedly used by those people in those situations, and then later appeared on tons of official records, from social services to hospital reports to behavioural reports. I don't have any clear memories at all of my name in childhood or in my teen years being used in like an affectionate or gentle way or a kind way. And while I'm sure it must have happened at some point from some adult somewhere, I don't remember it, because the instances of my name being used in harrowing situations drowns out any ability for me to remember any of the other times. Now, of course, as an adult, I am fortunate enough to have had lots of wonderful people come into my life, both through BookTube and offline. People who have genuinely cared for me and supported me and been there for me through all of the ups and downs of this process. And of course, the context in which they say my name is vastly different. But unfortunately for me, hearing my name from those people wasn't a kind of act of healing. Even despite knowing that the people in my life that I love dearly to my soul say my name in only good context, it doesn't erase all of the associations that I already have with my name. In fact, for me, hearing my name from friends and chosen family and people that I cherish in my life actively felt like it was tainting those situations. And it's funny looking back at it now from a place of better perspective, because I spot all of these times and situations wherein I found myself finding ways to like not use my name or hear my name in social situations. But funnily enough, it wasn't until I met lovely spouse Harry that I ever actually had a conversation about this issue that I had with my name with anybody, because lovely spouse Harry also did not like his name. In fact, actively loathed his name. And you know when you're out with somebody and you're maybe across a crowded space in a shopping centre or something like that, and you're trying to get their attention, we would do anything, jump through any kind of hoops to not have to call each other's actual name across that space. But in a way, I think developing those coping strategies to not have to actively say my name in any situations just kind of masked the need for me to look more deeply into why I hated it. And I'm sure that some of you have already guessed it by now, but the thing that really kind of made me go, was when lovely spouse Harry came out as trans and changed his name. And I watched him go through that journey from, yeah, I think this is me, to this is me and everything needs to change immediately, because I cannot for 1 second longer stand being that perception of me. Which actually brings me to the other reason why changing my name at this point in my life feels so right for me. As I said earlier in the video, names are funny things. They don't just come all on their own, they come with assumptions and baggage and societal roles that we are trying to fill. And being with Harry through his transition and his experience made me realise that I was performing so many roles that came with that name, and it was abruptly, startlingly not okay anymore. I have been in therapy multiple times in my life for multiple different reasons. It wasn't until I had a counsellor who understood the intersections of the experience between adoption, CSA, queerness, and the kind of baggage that comes with all of those things together, I was able to articulate some of these things out loud. And one of the things that kept coming up for me again and again was this kind of idea of like, this isn't for you. This experience, this ability to change yourself, that's not for you. And it's so funny because I identify quite loudly out loud in my offline life and my online life as the leftiest of lefty. I'm vocally queer, I am political, I identify as a witch, I'm married to a trans man, I'm a mental health advocate and a fat activist. And yet despite all of those things, I discovered that my experience was still so biased and so restricted. But in truth, through the process of counselling, I also have kind of started trying to be kinder to myself. And so thinking about this in a kinder way to myself, I will say that the previous versions of me also just weren't ready. They weren't ready to have to tell their parents or their wider community that they were doing this. And making any kind of change like this out loud is so massively vulnerable that I think you need to be completely supported and in the right headspace to do it, which for me is very luckily a place that I now find myself in my life. And so I want you guys to know, especially those of you out there who are maybe in the same position as me, who are adopted children who desperately want to change their name, or are queer people whose understanding of their gender identity has moved and shifted as they've got older, or just those people out there who feel like their name doesn't fit, that there is so much trauma and backstory associated with their name that a fresh start feels unobtainable or unachievable. I want to tell you guys that in preparation for this video, I of course told all of my close friends and family, so they know about this. This isn't like a massive jump scare, and for the most part the reception has been beautiful. So lastly, before the big reveal, which I promise I haven't been holding you in suspenders about all this time just because it's fun, the number one question that I have got from people when telling them that I had changed my name was, how did you pick? Like, what was your criteria? So personally for me, my criteria was I wanted an old-fashioned name. I love old-fashioned names. I wanted a name that had absolutely no association with either my birth family or my adopted family, one that wasn't in the family at any point as far as I can tell. I also wanted a middle name because quite frankly no one bothered to give me one, and middle names can often be the names with the most like thought and history given to them. And lastly, I wanted names that were nicknameable. My dead name is not very shortenable. There are very few shortenings of it that come naturally, and the ones that do always felt like nails on a chalkboard. I also wanted at least one permutation of those names that upon hearing it was gender neutral. So all of that out of the way, with all of that explanation. Hi guys, my name is Wyn and my pronouns are they, she. Wyn is the name that I will be going by, not just online but in my daily life. It's how I will introduce myself to new people. But it is short for Winifred Maggie, and I am more than happy to receive any kind of permutations on these names. Harry's currently in a phase where he's seeing how many different ways he can yell my name across public spaces. So yeah, any of the combinations that you can think of these names is fine. I will probably answer to it. Wyn, Winnie, Fred. Harry has been calling me Freddie recently a lot, which, in case you can't tell from the beaming smile on my face, gives me so much euphoria to say out loud and hear out loud. As a queer person, I was very, very used to the term gender euphoria. It's the joy that you get from hearing yourself gendered correctly and hearing your name said correctly. But I never expected to experience it to quite this degree. And yet here I am, a little they with a new name and the happiest I have ever been in my adult life. In the coming few days, I will be changing my name on all of my socials and all of my bios and things like that. So hopefully it'll be a little bit easier to remember, although you'll obviously still always be able to find me at Literary Diversions wherever I am. One of my absolute besties was in complete terror at the fact that her brain was going to default to my dead name, and that out loud in conversations with other friends she might default to my dead name, and that's okay. This is a big change. I think you can ask any person in the world who has ever changed their name and their pronouns, and they will pretty much tell you that as long as you are sincerely attempting to get it right and it was just a slip, that's totally fine. So yeah, there you go. Done it. I've changed my name. I'm gonna have to change the intro to my 60% diaries and about 50,000 other legal documents. But for me, it has 110% been worth it. Thank you guys so much for always being here and for your continued support, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!